welcome and congratulate all of our wonderful participants today. As we've said, we're just coming over the finish line of a year that probably none of us envisaged. Whatever our 2020 vision was in January, it's unlikely to have been upheld. So congratulations and for arriving here, and congratulations on your remarkable insight, because sometimes great things in life come to you through circumstances that arrive externally. And I think that this video conference or our Zoom session is one of those things. So what we have with us is an audience of people who are keen to first of all acknowledge what wellness and well-being is, what it means for performance, and to use this period to pick up some important information, tricks and tips on how to navigate moving forward in some value that's going to last way longer than the new year. So welcome everybody to our virtual hub. A little bit of housekeeping. We've already received a lot of remarkable questions, so thank you for those. Please keep them coming. So we'll be looking at every one of your questions and either responding during the session, after the session, as in the Q&A period, or Alessandra and I have agreed that if necessary, we're happy to go through a Q&A session at some time agreeable to you moving forward, to deal with some of the residual areas if we don't get through all of your very important and insightful questions during the session. There'll also be a short survey at the end of the session to see what value you've derived from this, so that we can learn and add greater value. So I feel privileged and delighted to be here at Stone and Chalk as the head of the Academy. For those of you that are new to Stone and Chalk, we were established as a fintech in 2015. Since then, we've gone on in leaps and bounds to become an impact network that covers off on all emerging technologies. And therefore, we're at the centre of an ecosystem, an epicenter of an ecosystem that is driving innovation, performance, growth, productivity, and a new way of thinking, let's call that mindsets, for the new economy. So again, congratulations for being here. What I want to do just now is introduce you to Alessandra, and it's a great privilege to do that. Alessandra is an author, a subject matter expert with more than a decade of experience working with some of the best known brands like Coles, ANZ, NAB, Shell, etc., across Australia and globally. And in the process of doing that, what we've all benefited from is her remarkable insights on performance and the DNA of performance. So she's an author and general all-round Wonder Woman. So really excited to touch on many of the subjects that are going to be insightful and practical for each of us. So without further ado, keep your questions coming. I'll be keeping track of those. We're going to cover off on a few topics in the presentation and then move through to other topics that we can discuss in more detail. And Alessandra and I have prepped for those, so yeah, she will make reference to those as we go through the content. And so on that note, without further ado, I'm handing over to you, Alessandra.
Hi, thank
you. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that lovely introduction and the warm welcome. And also thanks for the really lovely invitation to come and speak here today. And it's always an absolute joy and pleasure to talk to you. As you know, we share many common passions and interests related to high performance. So absolutely delighted. It's also been really fantastic this year to get to work one-on-one with the Stone and Chalk leadership team and to really help them leverage their DNA and do some cool genetic biohacking to help lift their performance to an even higher level. I would also love to personally welcome everyone on the call. I know this is a very busy time of year. We are literally skidding into Christmas, and tempers can be fraught. There's a lot of frustration. It's been an intense year all round, and the social calendar is also ramping up. So I just want to personally congratulate you and give you a huge pat on the back. And I think you should do the same for showing up, because showing up is actually the #1 step towards a journey to high performance. And speaking of today's topic, so sort of under the broad umbrella of mindset and skills for peak performance, and particularly more of a focus on how to lead self under uncertainty. I just want to sort of bring your attention to the fact that I think that we could think of peak performance as a little bit as a, as a house. And if peak performance were a house, then leading self would definitely be a foundation. So what I want to talk today about, and I'll give you some specific tips, is really specifically around why I truly believe that going into 2021 as a leader, this is the #1 skill you need to get good at, and you need to get good at really fast in order to increase and scale your performance, that of your team, to improve people retention and ultimately affect the bottom line. Now, if you are really committed to achieve and maintain true high performance, then I think this is absolutely the place to start. And I would love to bring your attention to, if you like, perhaps a different lens to high performance than maybe perhaps what you have come across. So what I consider true high performance is related to the sustainability of achieving optimal levels in all sorts of facets that go well beyond the workplace and career development. So what I mean by true performance is really the ability to keep optimizing our emotional self, our mental, our physical self, our professional self, our socializing self. So, and the ability to keep all these plates spinning without dropping them, whilst at the same time being able to self-renew in energy so that we have boundless levels of vitality, motivation, grit, passion, that then as leaders, both at home and at work, we can bring to the table to then really inspire others and lead self to achieve really the big plans and the big dreams that each one of us has been put on the planet. Now, if you're on board with this concept of high performance, welcome. You are truly in the right place. And just a little bit of a preamble in terms of, dealing with stress and that kind of subject, because I feel that it's kind of almost like being done to death. And just out of curiosity, yesterday I did a quick Google search on, how to deal with stress as a leader, and I got 1 billion answers. So clearly we're not short of strategies when it comes to dealing with stress. And yet my personal observation as, a high performance coach over a decade, working with now close to probably 2,000 people, at least half of that one-on-one, is that most of these people actually already came to the table having an initial conversation with me, some of them being expert mindful meditators, some of them already doing gratitude journals, most of them going to the gym on a regular basis, especially some of the younger cohorts also being totally aware of what a well-being diet for performance is. So, and yet, my observation is that actually probably 90% of them were actually struggling. And this is not a surprise when we look at recent stats, for example, from the Black Dog Institute and Beyond Blue. We know that particularly this year and particularly in the last 3 months, mental health rates has absolutely skyrocketed. Suicide rates have skyrocketed, especially in some of the younger and older generations. So what is going on? We've got all this information, we've got gazillion apps. Now we have machine learning, we have AI. So why is it that we're failing to utilize or apply or really get the benefits from all these tools? Now, I'm not discounting, mindfulness. I'm not discounting gratitude. These are tools that I utilize in my executive coaching, and we match them to to a client's DNA. And there's heaps of scientific evidence to say that these are awesome tools to help increase your capacity for resilience and adaptation. However, what I'm saying is that those tools, I truly believe, have been out contextualized. What I mean is that there is a time and a place to do mindfulness. There is a time and a place to meditate. There is a time and a place to be grateful. My observation is that, you know, when you are in the moment and you have sort of like the email from hell that has landed in your inbox, or you're having the conversation from hell with your client, or, you know, your shareholders, or whatever it is, at that particular time, you're not going to be doing your gratitude journal. Okay, we all know this. In that particular moment, we usually like to, I can hear Anna, I think, having a little chuckle. We need to understand that there are very profound genetic and physiological processes at play that basically prevent us from actually being in the right mindset and chemical mindset to actually apply those strategies. So what do we do? And why is it so important? Well, it's important because we were actually talking about this with Anne yesterday. You know, ultimately, you're only a pilot when the engine fails. What I mean by this is that, you know, you could be sort of the most inspiring leader, and you could have this beautiful sort of stress management program that you're doing at home. And then when it comes to actually having to switch off automatic pilot and actually taking the reins in your hand of that steering wheel with all the sort of, you know, unexpectedness, uncertainty, and unpredictability of a situation like we have gone through this year, then that is the measure of true high performance. And I think that this requires a shift in mindset and a really shift in sort of the framework that we put around stress management. It's the same as going to the hospital, right? You could be going for an appointment to see a specialist, an orthopedic specialist, for example, or you could be going into emergency, whereby you will be attended to by an orthopedic specialist surgeon, but you know that those are completely different approaches, and you're going to be given very different treatments. So this is what we need to really, truly understand. So with any journey, we have a map. And I think that this year has been a year where perhaps many of us have felt like they have kind of gone off, you know, got off sort of the map, and they, you know, we don't really know where we're at. So we need to do a little bit of calibration and working out where are we at now, so that we can then work out whether we need to get back on track onto the main road. So what I'd love you to do is, I'm a huge fan of origami. I've become a huge fan of origami this year, when after doing 4 months of intense lockdown in Melbourne, I suddenly found myself having to basically be a teacher for primary school children. And with that came the intense realization that I've chosen the right career. Thank goodness that I didn't go into education for higher education, because I think that there would be some very unhappy primary school children. However, what I learned during lockdown is that my son is a whiz at origami. So I've been kind of channeling a little bit of him in my leadership workshop. So I want you to get just a piece of paper, just normal piece of paper, and then I want you to just fold it in half vertically. Okay, so you end up with something like this, and get a little pen. And then what I'd like you to do is, on the left side, I'd like you to write 2020, and particularly in brackets 4 weeks. So I want you to start doing a little bit of a kind of mapping and calibration around where you've been over the past few weeks. And I'm going to guide you through it. You don't have to share this with anybody. So don't worry if you're not good at kind of graphic design stuff. We're just going to be writing down a few words. So first and foremost, I would like you to write down in that left-hand column, thinking back of the last 4 weeks, a word that describes your energy. Where's your energy be at? You could keep it simple by writing down high, low. You could write wired, you could write exhausted, excited, whatever it is, just try and capture it with that one word. Good. The next word that I'd like you to write down below that is a word that describes mostly the main emotion that you have felt over the last 4 weeks. So it could be overwhelm, relief, joyfulness, sadness, fear, whatever it is. And obviously we're not robots, so there will be heaps of emotions, but generally over the past 2 to 4 weeks, what has been the dominant theme in your emotional landscape? Got that one down? Good. Okay. Next line is a word that describes your motivation. And motivation is whatever it means to you, whether it's in a professional sense or whether it's a, in a more human, private sense. Maybe you have special hobbies. Just think of something that's meaningful to you. Where's your motivation at? Again, you could write high, low, gone AWOL, super motivated. Just get that one down. And last one, I would like you to write down a word that describes to you best what your stress response has been like. So it could be reactive, impulsive, measured, deliberate. So the whole gamut of things, Again, it could be irritable, biting. And let's be honest here. Yeah, sort of starting to establish an honest conversation with self really is, again, part of this foundational process. Okay, all right, so you've got your 4 words, hopefully. And before we move on to the next column, I want to spend literally 30 seconds explaining why this process is important. You're probably all familiar with the term neuroscience. You've probably already heard about brain plasticity. You have, perhaps a little bit of an idea of, what that means. And if you don't, I just want to describe to you that basically over the past 5 to 10 years, we have really accumulated very high level evidence that tells us that our thoughts and our beliefs have a huge impact on the actual physical processes and shape of our brain. In other words, thinking certain thoughts, particularly on a repetitive basis, changes the connections between brain cells, activating certain pathways and communication links that were not there before. So the first step into learning to lead self, after working out where we're at, is taking a good look at, okay, this is where we've been. So for many people I've spoken to in the last few months is, tired. Okay, so tired is the new normal for many people. Their motivation has been, pretty low. It's been affected. Their level of stress reactivity has been high. They're feeling frustrated. They're a bit tetchy. They're answering back quite quickly. They answer before they think. And their emotion has been anything from overwhelmed to, again, sort of quite low and perhaps, depressed. Now, you don't have to sort of be at the end of that scale, but these are the conversations that I've been having with a lot of leaders over the last few weeks. So what I want you to do now is look at these words and think whether those words are the ones, in terms of if they were like a toolkit, if they're the right toolkit to take you into a 2021 that I'm assuming you're hoping is going to be successful, joyful, healthy, inspiring, passionate. I've never had someone saying, no, I'd like my 2021 to be the same as it's been as the previous. So I'm hoping that we're on the same journey here. So I'd like you to then move on to the next page, and writing for 2021. And now we've done this, so we can do this quite quickly. So write down a word that summarizes what you want your energy in 21 to be. Is it going to be vibrant, exceptional, unstoppable? What is your emotion going to be? Do you want to feel happiness, joyfulness, excitement? What about your motivation? Through the roof, exceptional, outstanding. What about your stress reactivity? So this is going to be an interesting word, because Stress is there, it doesn't go away. And incidentally, I think that a lot of the conversations we've had around COVID, where the number one word that I heard all the time, both privately and publicly, was unprecedented, unprecedented, unprecedented this, unprecedented that. I literally heard that word probably, 1,000 times over the course of 6 months. And the thing is, I think that saying that COVID was unprecedented is a little bit like saying, sir, the dog ate my homework. And no disrespect or no diminishing of any hurt or pain that you and your loved ones may have experienced. I was touched directly with the death in the family. So I'm not discounting the pain. The pain was real. The epidemic was unprecedented, yeah, but the fact of going into an event that is unpredictable and uncertain, that gives us no stability in terms of the future, that's not unprecedented. We do that all the time. We have done that throughout the evolution of mankind, in fact. So when you think in terms of your stress response, perhaps if you're kind of a little bit stuck in terms of what you're thinking, that could be a realistic, pragmatic word that is not a hyperbole and reflects really how humanity, how we are wired as a species, I would suggest that good word would be deliberate. So we can put that exercise on the side. We're going to use that in a minute. And I now want you to think a little bit in terms of what has led you here, what has led you to the column of 2020. Now, in my world, and looking through the lens of genetics, there are lots of sort of biochemical and very genetic DNA-based things that can give us certain traits that make us more prone to have high stress reactivity. Within the context of running an online masterclass, I don't think that that is going to be the best way for me to serve you and help you develop the skills and mindset of leading self. So what I want to do instead is show you very briefly some mindset that I encounter as being obstacles and challenges in the way to achieving a high performance mindset within a high stress response. And these are in terms of evolutions, and you might recognize yourself in this. So what I'd like you to do is actually take the same piece of paper that you folded in half. Okay, and this time you're going to fold it on the other side into 3. So you're going to do 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so you end up with something like this. And then you're going to fold the bottom bit. So you're basically going to have 6 quadrants. Okay, now you can actually write this down, but hey, it's Christmas and a little bit of origami is a bit of fun, so why not? So give it a go and do this. So what I'd like you to do is basically write down some of the main traits of these mindsets, okay? So you're going to put deluder here, and then the other ones are going to move across. And I'm going to show you what these mindsets look like. So if we're in a certain mindset, what do we sound like? How do we behave? And then what we need to work on, what muscles we need to develop in order to evolve onto the next level of mindset. So number 1 is deluders. So the deluded mindset is super, super common. And I used to be this, by the way, incidentally, when I worked in corporate in the UK. I was a classic type A executive. I worked incredible amounts of hours with, little sleep and little consideration for communication to self and really checking in with myself. And lo and behold, ended up with burnout. But at the time, I was completely delusional. And in fact, when people asked me how I was, even though I must have looked like a crazy banshee running around with, 5,000, I worked for a coffee company. So I had, full disclosure. So 5 or 6 espressos a day. So on the outside, I looked one way, but I felt I was doing amazingly well. I totally saw myself as a complete peak performer. And, I ignored tiredness and ignored sleep issues and all those kinds of things. So perhaps this is you. So maybe as a deluder, what you're saying is, nah, I'm fine. I'll just catch up in the, in the holidays. I'm really not that bad. And everyone is tired, aren't they? They're all tired, and this coffee, Red Bull, I'll be okay. What the leaders do, though, is that ultimately they rely on people because their performance is actually a little bit sketchy. So they can drop balls. And so what happens is that it's the network around them, whether it's the social network or whether it's colleagues or team, that end up with the slack that is left behind. So in terms of their decisions, they're actually deficient. There is no decision because they don't believe that there is a problem when it comes to their stress levels. So their tip, and if you are in the deluder mindset, is to cultivate awareness. Okay, so outside of stress times, really start watching yourself and do a little bit calibration every day. And it's like, was I deluded today? You know, in those conversations, in how I'm feeling. The next mindset is the delayer. Isn't it interesting? Actually, the animation delayed there. I love it when the universe conspires to prove my point. So delayers are people that say, I'll be fine. I just have to finish that project, or I just have to get to Christmas, or I just have to get through the merger, or I just have to complete my course. And then that's when I'm going to stop and I'm going to, you know, look after my sleep or eat a better diet or look at reducing alcohol, you know, or implementing, you know, stress management techniques. So what delayers do is that they rely on time. They're always short on time, so they blame the shortness of time on their problems. And so their decisions are always postponed. Yeah, I'll decide when I get there. I'll do that when we get there. So if you find yourself in the delayer mindset, what you need to do is actually work on action. I'll give you an example. Yesterday is a new client I've been working with over the last couple of months, and we know that, you know, she has, you know, considerable mental health issues, and she's been given a diagnosis of depression. Now, I worked in a clinic specializing in mental health for years. A genetic approach to mental health is revolutionary. So I prescribed something that I knew would make an absolute difference. And several weeks later, I hadn't heard back from her. So I followed up. And what I found is that she actually hadn't ordered this specific thing that I asked her to take. And so she'd been postponing and saying, I've been too busy. I've been too busy. So she was actually getting in her own way. She was given the solution, but just delayed it because of the blame on lack of time. Now, what we want to aim to get to as much as possible, and by the way, it's not like we are 100% discerners or 100% deluders all the time. There's always a mixture, so we're constantly evolving. So what discerners do instead is they ask, how do I feel and what do I need? And as a leader who's achieved the discernment mindset, those leaders will go, what does this person need and how are they feeling? Yeah, so there's this real ability to pause and have sort of that sense of connection. They are self-reliant. They don't blame anywhere. Their decisions are deliberate. There is deliberate intent. And so for them, it's about actually amplifying. How do you get them to the next level where you do more? What other tools can you introduce? So what I'd like you to do is basically just spend, you know, a few seconds. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to really work out where you think you're at most of the time. And then write down in the bottom rung where you sort of have, you know, 3 extra boxes like this. Okay, what is your tip? Is it awareness, action, amplification? Because these are things that then you can continue working on after the masterclass. So briefly, I'm here to say that, first of all, your stress response is not your fault. And we know this from genetic studies, we know this from animal studies, and we know that we have particular parts of the brain that are highly engaged under stress. So the brainstem being probably the main one. And so when we're looking at the battle of rationality and prefrontal cortex, which is where all our rational thoughts that tell us, I need to meditate, I need to sleep more, I need to have more water, I need to go off for a walk to cool down, all of those rational thoughts versus the brainstem that is highly reactive and communicates stress very quickly to the rest of the body, the brainstem always wins. And I absolutely love this quote by a functional neurologist, a US-based functional neurologist called Dr. Titus Tu, who, when I heard this quote, I thought that is just absolutely brilliant. So we basically, when we're in that position of stress, we cannot win and we cannot engage and utilize those techniques. We need to do something else. Now, I wanted to share this slide because I think that this is really fascinating. Now, we have known perhaps not so much about the brainstem, but about this evolutionary mechanism that hijacks our rational thinking and ability to have deliberate and conscious decisions when stressed for a long time. Back in the 50s, they did these studies on goslings that are baby geese. And so they took 2 or 3 or 4 day old goslings. And what they did, they basically moved this black shape above their nest. So they didn't disturb them from the nest. And what they found is that when they moved the shape in the direction of the arrow, what the goslings saw was basically a short neck with a long tail. And so they fled the nest, assuming that it was a hawk, okay? When they actually did the opposite and moved the shape in the opposite direction, and so they saw an elongated neck with a large wingspan that was reminiscent of Mother Goose, they stayed put. Now, no one had taught these goslings anything. There was actually an innate evolutionary mechanism at very genetic level. So when you actually think in terms of what is actually affecting your stress response, I want you to briefly think in terms of there are all these things at play. So there'll be your genetics, which is, you know, some people, for example, have very, they have variants in genes that make them react like this really, really quickly. So their brain gets flooded by stress chemicals, and then their neurosignaling going from the brainstem through to the rest of the body is absolutely immediate. And then there's your environment, your context that's going to speak to your genetics. So for example, some genetics of stress are actually activated when we experience trauma when we are children, trauma of any kind. It doesn't have to be sort of the terrible trauma that we might be imagining. It could be actually, you know, parents separating, for example, or even some milder degree of neglect. And at environmental level now, we tend to think of the environment creating basically stress, and we go straight away in terms of emotional stress and mental stress, but you need to think in terms of your environment as being also physical stress. So when you, for example, have an infection, when you have a cold, when you don't drink enough water, these are actual physical external stresses that then affect the reactivity of your brain, which is then communicated throughout your cells. Your levels of energy also are going to have a huge impact on your ability to be present in the moment. So years ago, I don't know if we had this chat with Anne yesterday when we were talking about the, you know, the disaster on the River Hudson, you know, when in a US flight, basically the Captain Sully, famous Captain Sully, there's been a movie made about him, had to land in unprecedented times because that had never happened, a double engine fail plane. Now they tried to reproduce that in subsequent studies with simulation flights, and every single time everybody died, whereas everybody survived. Now, what Captain Sully said was that he was just doing his job. So he had this incredible level of mastery through thousands of hours of practicing flights, but at the same time he also said that he felt he'd been able to handle the plane in spite of the engine fail because he just had, I think it was 4 or 5 days off where he'd had really great amount of sleep and rest, and so his brain was so engaged. So that has a huge impact on our ability. So what are we going to do? I'm here to share some tips. So I hope that I've shared with you basically the importance of understanding why, you know, doing meditation in the moment, whilst it's really useful outside of that, is not going to work because your brainstem is just so automated that it is going to communicate to your heart rate to go faster, to your blood pressure to go higher, to start sweating, to stop your digestion, to constrict your pupils, to basically make your muscles really, really tight. And what happens is that it works on a feedback mechanism. So one of the first signals that comes back to the brain is whether your muscles are clenched. And the most significant muscles in the body to communicate stress to your brain are the muscles in the face. So when you're in the moment and you are feeling completely overwhelmed and out of control, the first thing that you can do is scrunch up your face really, really tight and then relax it. The reason we scrunch it up is that it makes it easier to then relax it. This communicates to a nerve called the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that actually switches on the rest and digest, so the calming part of the parasympathetic nervous system. So tip number one, clench and relax your face. The second thing is, and these are all evidence-based tips, by the way. So second thing is go to the toilet. Ladies, it's a bit harder if you kind of like makeup like me, but you know, if you're stressed, this works really, really well. So run some very cold water, fill up your hands, and then splash your face with it several times. If you don't want to splash it because of makeup, you can actually submerge your face, in the cold water in the hands. So that has been shown in studies to, again, activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So it shuts down the heart rate response. So that's something that you can do wherever you are, provided that you've got water. And the third thing is what's called 1-2 breath. Now, you've probably heard about the importance of breathing, okay? And you can do lots of breathing exercises in the evenings and all that. This is very, very specific when you're in the moment of activation and you are trying to reconnect and reactivate the prefrontal cortex rather than the brainstem taking over. So what we do here is that you're going to exhale for twice as long as you inhale. This is because you're going to be clearing high levels of carbon dioxide. So when we are stressed and we are over breathing, we actually increase levels of carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide activates your brain cells. So it makes them feel more stressed. So by breathing out for longer and really exhaling, you are reducing levels of carbon dioxide at a very physical level in the brain. The fourth thing is palming. So with palming, you can activate your hands and do this, or you can just use your hands straight away, and you're going to be pressing onto your eyes. So you're actually pressing the palm of your hands onto your eyelids. There is a specific connection between the eyes and, again, the nervous system sort of stress centers in the brain, and that is going to cool down the nervous system so that then you can think and buy yourself time to then decide on deliberate intent. And the final thing, this is an absolute biohack. So this is highly used among Silicon Valley CEOs and startup execs. So this is called theanine, L-theanine. It's a completely natural supplement. It's made in Japan. It's it's really high quality. And it is an extract of green tea. So it has no caffeine in it. And you would take about 400 milligrams of this. Double check with your doctor. There are no side effects, but I have to say a medical disclaimer because I'm a clinical nutritionist. So I have to give you a medical disclaimer. You can Google this. You'll find it online. It's very cheap. You take 2 of those tablets and it increases levels of GABA within 30 minutes. So GABA is the neurotransmitter of calm. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here. I'm aware of time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to continue the conversation. I run a fortnightly Smart Hack newsletter where we look at basically promoting 2 to 4 minute videos to give you little smart hacks for high performance. So you can get your phone and take a screenshot of the QR code there. And I'm just going to hand over back to Anne.
I can't start the video. Your host has asked you to start the video. Start my video. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent, beautiful. That was fantastic, Alessandra. I've not had so many great, useful and short tips condensed into 30 minutes ever.
I did my best. I really want to deliver tips. The time was short. We started a bit later, so I thought I'd give it the full 30 minutes. But as you said earlier, really happy to continue the conversation at another time.
So fantastic. What it's going to lead us into is a whole set of questions that we've already received from participants. And I want to take those in a particular order. And but I'm just going to begin with two little statements that I think are relevant here, because our first question is about mindset, and we're also going to talk about motivation in that order. But I just wanted to share with you the idea that when I was studying psychology, someone asked us in developmental psychology, what was more important, nature or nurture? So here we're talking about genetics or the environment. And the lecturer gave a wonderful response that I've never forgotten. It was, it depends on what you think is more important to the rectangle, height or width. Love that answer. And
that's a lovely analogy.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it brings us to the part of this that is the environmental part, believe it or not, which is the mindset question. So we've received a question to say, what exactly is mindset? And what I'm going to do is have a swing at that as an answer and then get your response to that, if you wouldn't mind. So I've said that mindset is a malleable set of conditions that we apply to make sense of a stimulus around us. So we use our mindset to determine how we're going to respond in any given situation, be it a day-to-day situation or whatever. And to look at the precise elements of it, I'm saying that our mindset is constructed of our experiences, our values, our beliefs, our knowledge. And the most important thing here is that they are malleable. So the idea when we think of wellness, to my way of thinking, is that we hold on to those beliefs, values, knowledge, etc., very lightly, and to approach the world with a sense of curiosity. So what's your sense of that response, and how does it apply to what we've spoken about today?
I love that response. I think it's really very elegantly and eloquently put, and I think it's very, very comprehensive within the scope of what sort of I was discussing earlier and a conversation that we had yesterday. I think that absolutely mindset is malleable. I think that to begin with, there are specific genetic and biochemical signatures that can, if you like, start us off in life going towards a specific kind of mindset. We then have interactive environmental and relationship connections that affect that and that help us amplify or start to change those traits. So, and I think that ideally, I think all mindsets we should hold lightly and continuously evolve in a way that we are keep getting information and new ideas and always questioning the values and the beliefs that sit behind them with any mindset.
So there are very real constructs is what we're saying, but and there is an opportunity to influence those significantly. At risk of throwing in another analogy, another nice way that I think about this is that when we think about Bach, the manuscript, if you like, is written, the notes are written. The way that we interpret those and play those notes varies for every instrument or every musician. So that's sort of a nice way of thinking through that. It leads us on to the next question, which is what are the key drivers of motivation? And I just wanted to, along with the conversations that we've had, talk about what we believe at Stone and Chalk are the three main elements of motivation, looking at intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And the enduring one of those is actually intrinsic motivation, because it means that we're refueling ourselves, if you like, and generating our own energy. Everybody knows as a leader that extrinsic motivation has a very short shelf life and doesn't produce the best responses either in satisfaction or performance. So I'm going to say that the three elements that we think are important to intrinsic motivation are, first of all, autonomy and agency. and that means the right to choose, the right to make decisions. The second element, as you referred to with Sally, is the opportunity for mastery and growing skills. And the third element is a sense of purpose and connectedness, the relatedness. So those three elements are elements of self-determination and really capture all of the important components of intrinsic motivation. Discuss.
I would say an and rather than an or. So yes to everything. And I would love to add from the genetic perspective, because we now have quite a lot of data, and I have a lot of data related to this, that some people are actually naturally and genetically intrinsically motivated. And there was a question that came out that was related to, if you like, to the three most important genetic variants that we be aware of. So I'll weave it into that. And I would say this particular gene called COMT, which is a gene that basically affects our turnover and metabolism of dopamine, adrenaline, and noradrenaline, as well as estrogen, actually plays a huge role in whether we are mostly intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated. So people that have a very slow variant in this gene have very high levels of dopamine. So they do extremely well with intrinsic motivation. And what happens is that they usually are also very competitive and they work very well to deadlines and goals. And because high dopamine allows us to create long-term strategy and vision, so they can actually motivate themselves even during times of stress over long periods of time. People that are the opposite side of the spectrum, that's myself, so low dopamine producers and have a fast COMT. Intrinsic motivation works once you have put in place extrinsic motivation strategies. So, for example, in a professional environment, it could be actually changing and varying your daily routine. So not having the way you do work replicate every single day. Engineering expectations in your calendar, so putting things to look forward to, you know, that sense of going towards Christmas when you're a kid. That's what you're trying to do through the engineering of that. Increasing a high protein diet to boost your dopamine levels, and so these people do usually quite well on lower carbohydrate diets to really push the dopamine, and they do very well on fasting or intermittent fasting. And so that once then their neurochemistry goes back to normal and they feel more active and engaged at mental level, then they can absolutely apply all the intrinsic motivation. But if you like, people like myself are a little bit disadvantaged, and there's about 45% of us, of the population, that have this gene. So this is a really good one to know of yourself and also know of your team, because the engagement strategies are going to be very different.
So in your case, you're talking about fast COMT, low dopamine, and charged by having something to look forward to.
Having something, there's heaps of raising dopamine, if you like, artificially, to and you'll find people will know if they're at this level, because they basically usually work really close to the deadline. So they will leave things until the last minute, and then when they actually call corporate warriors, because they're able under pressure then to perform extremely well without experiencing huge level of stress. So they'll feel stressed because obviously there's a deadline coming, but they can be thrown in at the deep end. And even if you give them 6-month deadline, the people with the slow COMT, which are called CO gene, they will start off straight away and start working towards it. And the others can also be labeled as a little bit as low performers because they don't seem to come up with the goods, but they deliver. And so it's a way of giving people permission not to feel guilty if that's how you are, that's how you're wired, and you can make it work for you by actually putting your hand up for the really high stress, unpredictable situations, because you will actually do much better and fare better from a stress response perspective.
I'm loving this because it also feeds into the things that we talk about in terms of work satisfaction and doing work that you really enjoy, which is obviously going to lend you to be a higher performer. If you just know where your sweet spots are, so to speak, or not if you're talking about removing carbs. So some other really good questions here, and one that I know that's of interest to most people. We're seeing a plethora of apps come onto the market where we're talking about mindfulness, meditation, etc. And one of the great questions we've received is, can AI help mindfulness on a daily basis? And I know that you have a view on this, so let's share it.
Look, I absolutely love this question, and I don't have it here, but I just want to show you. I'm the queen of high performance gadgets. So I spend thousands of dollars every year reviewing all the latest things. So I'm really excited about where we're heading. From my perspective and the knowledge and research that I do constantly, I really think that we're not, AI is not here yet. So I think that it's exciting. We've got all sorts of apps that utilize machine learning, where they basically, the profiling and the precision of the profiling is getting absolutely insane. So that then with the machine learning, you are really given a customized program, if you like, and a machine-driven coach. I think that, when we're talking about pure AI, we're really talking about almost sentient beings, and we're not there yet. But I think that, it's going to be really exciting to keep going on this journey and getting there. In terms of apps, I actually really like one that's not just mindfulness, but it really is for high performance. And it's called rock.ai. So there's a free version and the paid version, but even with the free version, you can really customize so much in terms of the coaching that you get. So basically super exciting. Great that we have some things already, but we're not there yet.
That's fantastic. There's a question here that relates to priority areas in peak performance, but I think that we've covered that on the Deluder, Delayer and Discerner axes or template that you gave us. So I'm going to move into another question, and I want to position it in terms of a conversation that I was surprised to have yesterday with an individual who told me that during the work from home period of COVID, their leader didn't check in with her at all on how she was going from a wellbeing perspective.
Wow.
So there were team meetings that were group events, but it leads to a question that we've got here about how important is it to discuss wellness on a day-to-day basis with your teams, with your people? Because that is a glaring example, I would think, of a missed opportunity and, to be frank, possibly some wellbeing neglect on the part of the leader not to check in. So how important is wellbeing and wellness as a responsibility of leadership?
Oh, it's really becoming, and has been, I think what COVID has done is really highlighted how really not great we were at this before. And if you like, sort of wellbeing programs were more the jurisdiction of HR ticking certain boxes. I think that looking at also at high performance trends for 2021, we are really seeing, particularly coming from North America, huge merging of wellness with health and performance. So we now have really relevant data to look at in terms of well-being and mental well-being spend per person, in terms of basically the benefits that we can obtain, even from a very sort of monetary perspective. But I think that gone are the days where, as leaders, we could assume that, whatever people are going through mentally and emotionally or at home is their own problem, and it has nothing to do with me. So that was basically, it's a relic from 19th century industrial revolution working methods, which has all to do with manufacturing productivity rather than productivity in the sense of creativity and innovation. So I feel very sorry for the person you spoke to, because it has been an incredibly difficult year. And I am partly surprised, because most of the leaders I've spoken to actually if you like, their problem was the opposite, that they found that they were spending too much time as counselors rather than CEOs as leaders, and they didn't feel well equipped. So I can only think that perhaps this leader themselves perhaps had issues themselves and didn't feel comfortable, but nevertheless is not an excuse to say, hey, I don't know much about this, but you know, at least doing a check-in. So I think it's absolutely neglect, as you mentioned.
And I think that there's probably an element of deluding and delaying in there as well. But that could be the topic of another conversation, Alessandra. It's time to wrap up. But what I'd like to say on behalf of every participant is I just feel as though Santa's stocking has just been made chock-a-block full of remarkable gifts that I'm going to get to use through the entire year. So thank you so much for sharing your really valuable and evidence-based insights with us. It's been an absolute joy. And I think we stay tuned for some more exciting modules just along these lines in 2021. So for now, I'd like to thank you so much. Thank particularly our participants for staying with us during what was a very exciting and informative conversation. Thank you to the Stone and Chalk team for setting up this for us, and may I wish everybody a very safe and merry festive season with a fabulous 2021 ahead of you. Thank you.
Thank you.